questions. On we go. The traditional philosophical thing to do next, that is, first, would be to talk to you more about Socrates. You remember, he's one of the guys on the t-shirt I showed you in the previous video. There's a good chance you've at least heard of the guy before. If you haven't, he lived in ancient Athens. Socrates died in 399 BCE. And the reason he died was because he was put to death. And the reason he was put to death was that he was seriously annoying. He wandered around town asking people questions. What is justice? What is holiness? What is virtue? What is... Starting to see a pattern? Yup, with this guy, that was totally the pattern. And the reason this was annoying is that, annoyingly, people thought they knew the answers, but then they didn't know. Socrates was very skilled at the game of cross-examination. So his debate partner, interlocutor, victim, call it what you like, puts forward something like a general account or definition of justice, holiness, virtue, etc. And then Socrates shows that this general account has some bizarre, contradictory, unwelcome, totally unacceptable consequence. It can't be right after all. Oh, and one more thing. Socrates has this thing he does where he plays dumb. Gosh, by Zeus, I don't know what justice is. Can you tell me, good fellow citizen? Very ironic, this guy. It makes it all the more annoying when it turns out that actually the fellow citizen who thinks he is so smart is the dumb one after all. And Socrates then gets to do this thing where he says his wisdom consists in knowing what he doesn't know. In the land of the blind, the man who knows he is blind is king. Maybe. How do we know this about Socrates? Did he write a big book or something? No, Plato did. He's the other guy on the t-shirt from last time. Plato wrote what are called dialogues, purporting to present what Socrates was really like in person. Some very nice historical puzzles start there, but moving right along, since our topic today is Q, questioning, asking questions, it's like I'm set up to tee off on the ultimate Socratic question. Wouldn't it have been funny if Socrates had wandered around Athens, being a pest as usual, asking people, what is a question? While pretending not to know what a question is, even while asking the question. That would have been super ironic. I hope you agree. Fun fact, our word irony comes from a Greek word that means basically lie. You can see the legacy of Socrates in our very language. His fellow citizens were always accusing him of ironizing, that is, of being a big fat liar. But today we don't regard Socratic irony as lying exactly, but still, one may wonder, can you ask questions without even knowing what a question is? Babies do, it seems like. Have you ever been around one of those things? They ask so many questions, babies. Philosophers are just a species of very big baby, according to some critics. If babies can ask questions without really knowing what one is, it seems like Socrates could have gone around town asking the question, what is a question, without obviously being a liar about not knowing what it is himself. So let's do it. But I'll try not to be as snarky about it as Socrates probably would have been. What is a question? Maybe the thing you do now is pause this video, open a fresh browser tab, Google question definition, hit return, then just read whatever Google says. Go ahead. Do it. There's no shame in taking the easy way out. Honestly, if they'd had the internet in ancient Greece, maybe Socrates' fellow citizens would have done significantly better in warding off his weird attacks. Seriously. But they don't pay me the big bucks at NUS to read out Google search results on camera. But they do pay me, maybe, to point out that the very existence of Google is totally relevant to our topic. What is questioning? The internet is the most transformative technological innovation of the last 50 years. It's either that or just advances in modern computing generally. We'll get to that when we get to our module segment on computational thinking, by the way. As I was saying, The internet is the biggest deal since the internal combustion engine. More about cars when we get to the engineering segment. Our engineer is a car guy. You see, we've got this module totally planned out. It's going to make sense. Okay. Third time's the charm. The internet is a big deal. We all agree. Now, a thought experiment. Imagine an internet without Google. Yeah, you would use Bing or whatever. But that's not what I mean. Imagine that there's nothing like that. There's no search engine. There's no efficient protocols for requesting specific chunks of data and reliably getting them. Imagine a whole internet, vast ocean of info, and no way to access its contents except by staggering manually from hyperlink to link. Imagine that humans can only laboriously crawl across the vast datasphere like weary, feeble little info ants. Getting from one end of the internet to the other would be like walking to the North Pole. Now, obviously that's very silly and incoherent. No one would build a whole internet like that. Given with no way to have access via browsers and search engines, I'm not going to build a home page, not like the one I've got, if only a few data neighbors can ever visit it. But I'm making a serious point by means of this admittedly somewhat incoherent hypothetical. A point which I can put in question form. What is a search engine? It's a thing for getting answers. That is, it's a thing of questions. They could have called them question engines. You've got questions, Google's got answers. Internal combustion engines revolutionized the human capacity to locomote, getting from point A to B through space. The internet has revolutionized the human capacity to interrogate, thereby getting from point A to B in information space. We call this the information age, but we could call it the question age. I'm old enough to remember when there was no internet, but that's boring. Who wants to hear horror stories from old people about olden days? Instead, let's think back to even oldener days. The very first information technology revolution. Who or what asked the first question? The very first question. What was it like before? How did things change after? How do you even answer a question like that? Unfortunately, my special effects budget is limited, but maybe you can pause video, go to YouTube, and search for bits from The Tree of Life, directed by Terrence Malick. It's a feature film from 2011. Critically acclaimed, won a lot of awards, stars Brad Pitt. The film opens with a question from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Job, which appears on the screen. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? This is God answering a question with a question. Job has asked God why, because Job's life is a problem. Job suffers. Next in the film, we get 20 minutes in the life of a 1950s Texas couple whose son has died. So they, like Job, are asking, why? Then, stay with me here, the film jumps from Texas in the 50s to a magnificently filmed, already very famous creation sequence, which, as I mentioned before, you can probably find on YouTube. Birth of the universe, formation of the Milky Way, cooling fires of a newly formed Earth, oceans, primitive life, more advanced life, fish flopping on land, dinosaurs, meteor strike, extinction. That's another 15 minutes of film time right there. Then we jump back to Texas in the 50s. I know, what a crazy way to tell a story. Some critics, and even more viewers, didn't really like it. More Brad Pitt, less Big Bang, the people said. Terrence Malick is maybe more a philosopher at heart than a Hollywood director. I think he is. But here's my question for you. Are there questions in the universe from the birth of the universe to the death of the dinosaurs? I mean, in our universe, the real world, assuming our world is real and we aren't all trapped in the Matrix. Malick's film version of the history of the universe up to the death of the dinosaurs is just a visually vivid way to make you think about all that stuff. And if you're too lazy even to go to YouTube, you can just imagine it all, from the Big Bang to the big meteor strike, in your own head. The book of Job says the stars sing. In the film, there's all this beautiful antiphonal choral music in the soundtrack. Antiphonal music, that means call and response, question and answer. Does the first eye that opens ask the first question? Perception is about getting information. Is every glance of every eye a questioning glance? Or do you need more to make it a proper question? Maybe something a bit more Socratic? If every eye that looked knew what it didn't know and wanted to know better, maybe every eye would be a Socratic eye. It seems pretty doubtful that the first creature that evolved an eye knew what it didn't know. Then again, maybe demanding Socratic levels of wisdom to qualify as a questioner sets the bar too high. Even Socrates' fellow Athenians didn't know what they didn't know, apparently, but they did know what a question was. Maybe fish, who also aren't Socrates, can ask questions too. Malick includes a scene in which a dinosaur, obviously a predator type, puts its foot on the head of another dinosaur, kind of experimentally, evidently weighing its predator options. Seeing that scene, we can't help thinking the dinosaur is wondering what to do. It seems likely that Malick included this scene to symbolize something like the birth of compassion or empathy. The dinosaur, for whatever reason, lets the other one live. But you could also say, maybe that dinosaur symbolizes the birth of questioning. The dinosaur is being weird, letting prey live. Whenever we see anyone bucking the system, we figure that's because it's questioning the system. If Malick were a total ham, instead of the great director that he is, he might have done a sudden jump cut from the dinosaur with its claw wrapped around the skull of the other dinosaur, not back to Texas, but to a famous scene in Hamlet. You know the one. To be or not to be, that is the question. You could even have Hamlet holding Yorick's skull, even though that's totally from a different scene. Okay, that would be really bad, because the audience would immediately go, wait, what are you saying, Malick? Are you implying that this dinosaur, considering whether to kill the other dinosaur, is like Dino Hamlet or like Dino Socrates? Please, that's ridiculous. Yes, it's ridiculous. I'm no Terrence Malick. But I'm imagining this silly scenario to highlight a conceptual dilemma that I think is rather important. On the one hand, we think of questioning as very high-end activity. Hamlet, Socrates, the Book of Job, the university. On the other hand, questioning is elementary. It's elemental. It's primordial. First eye that opens, first brain that thinks. So which is it? It can't be both. If you don't know whether questioning is a recent super sophisticated thing that only humans do, or an ancient thing that even dinosaurs did, you obviously don't know what questioning is. And just asking Google for the definition of question won't settle it, although it may be helpful. Fun fact, the Tree of Life grew out of an earlier Malick project that was known simply as Q, and our module in the planning stage was known simply as Q. Coincidence? Yes, 100%. Confused? I quite understand. Here's what I'm going to do. The next video is going to make basically the same point this video did, but in a slightly different way. Same point, different film to illustrate the point.